Hello listeners, welcome to Mahatma Gandhi Letters. This is an approach to know Mahatma Gandhi's life through the letters and articles he has written. Dear listeners, in previous episode we have seen how Gandhiji was shocked to see the life of Indians there when he came to South Africa. This episode is very important and interesting one in the context of Indian history as well as understanding Gandhiji's life story. This is an article extracted from the book The Collected Works of Mahatma Gandhi Volume 1, and the article is called Historical Background of the South African Indian Problem. This article explains how Mohandas Gandhi, who came to South Africa for legal advice, formed into a revolutionary leader. Here it goes. When Gandhiji came to South Africa in 1893, the country consisted of 4 colonies: Natal, the Cape, the Transvaal, and the Orange Free State. These colonies were ruled by the descendants of Europeans who had discovered South Africa by sheer accident on their way to fabled India. They settled in it and developed it first as a convenient halfway house to the east, and later as their home. The white people who were dominant in the country in 1893 were the Dutch or Boers and the British, the Dutch in the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, and the British in Natal and the Cape. The Dutch had enjoyed almost undisputed rule in the country for about 200 years before the British arrived on the scene and captured the Cape from them in 1806 and Natal in 1843. Most of the Dutch thereupon moved inland and took possession of the Transvaal and the Orange Free State. The British, however, were settled also in Dutch territories and the Dutch in British territory. There was constant friction between these two peoples, both seeking ascendancy in the country, till, finally, came to a head in the Boer War, 1899 to 1902. As a result of which the whole of South Africa became a part of the British Empire. The British professed that they fought the war primarily to secure for British and Indian settlers in Dutch territories their legitimate rights. At the time of Gandhiji's arrival in South Africa, the 4 colonies were independent of one another and followed policies of their own. The British government in London at this time maintained its agents in these colonies to protect the interests of its subjects and controlled the policies of their governments to some extent. But later, when, in 1910, these colonies came together to form the Union Government of South Africa under the British flag and had acquired full self-government, the imperial government followed a policy of non-interference in regard to them, as well as to the government of South Africa as a whole, on the ground that South Africa was now a dominion, and therefore a self-governing member of the British Commonwealth, free to order its affairs according to its own wishes. The grievances of its Asiatic subjects became then a matter for the Governor-General in Council of the Union of South Africa, and the capacity of the British government to influence South African policies in this regard became nil. But this was not so during most of the time that Gandhiji was in South Africa. In developing agriculture and exploiting the mineral resources of the country, the whites of these colonies needed labor. They did not find the Africans steady and dependable as laborers, but they were content to live on what they obtained from their land, and most of them were not eager to work for wages. The British colonies, therefore, arranged with the British rulers of India to have Indian labor exported to South Africa under an indenture or contract. The first batch of such laborers came into South Africa in 1860. When the period of contract was over, these laborers could return to India, or remain in South Africa and renew their contract for a further period of 5 years, or settle as free citizens on land allotted to them by the government, equivalent in value to the cost of their return passage. These laborers were generally from among the poorest in India, untrained in hygienic habits and backward in several respects. Very soon in their wake came Indian traders to cater to their needs. This was the origin of the Indian population in South Africa. It was expressly laid down by the government of India in 1869, before renewal of contract or further emigration of such labor, that the laborers should enjoy equality of status after the period of indenture, and that they should live under the ordinary law of the land and not be subject to legislative or administrative discrimination. This was agreed to by the Natal government, which had asked for such laborers, and further confirmed in 1875 by the British government in London. Besides, the British Queen had, in her proclamation of 1858, guaranteed the same rights to the natives of our Indian territories as to all our other subjects. The Dutch, however, were all along averse to Indians remaining in South Africa. They desired Asiatic labor, including Chinese, to be brought in for a stipulated period and repatriated immediately thereafter. They wanted their colonies to be exclusively white, with the Africans confined to areas allotted to them. This was also the desire of the local British, who, like other European businessmen in South Africa, found Indians formidable rivals both in agriculture and in trade. The Indian cultivator introduced new fruits and vegetables and produced them cheaply and in abundance, thus bringing down the prices of the white farmer. The Indian trader lived cheaply, spent little on equipment or staff, and could easily undersell the British and the Dutch. The whites, therefore, feared that they would be swamped by the Indians if the Indians were allowed to enter the country freely and establish themselves on land, or trade as they pleased. Accordingly, numerous restrictions came to be placed on Indians. The earliest of these was Law 3 of 1885 in the Transvaal, a Dutch republic. It declared that Asiatics could not obtain the rights of Dutch citizenship. It required that, for sanitary purposes, Indians should reside in locations specially set apart for them, that they should not own fixed property except in such locations, and that such of them as entered for purposes of trade should be registered for a fee and should obtain a license. This, however, was a flagrant contradiction of Article 14 of the London Convention of 1884 between Her Majesty and the Transvaal Dutch Republic, which declared that all persons, other than natives, would have full liberty to enter, travel, reside, hold property, and carry on business in any part of the Republic of the Transvaal, and that they would not be subject to any taxes other than those imposed on Dutch citizens. The British High Commissioner in the Transvaal was there to look after the interests of British subjects resident in the colony. But owing to pressure of agitation on the part of the whites of the Transvaal, whether Dutch or British, who spoke of the threatened invasion of Asiatics into the colony, he advised the Home Government not to oppose the law, and the British government in London thereupon announced its decision not to raise any objections to this anti-Indian legislation. This reversal of policy towards the Indians in South Africa by the imperial government, in spite of its earlier pronouncements that Indians would have equal rights with other British subjects, opened the floodgates to discriminatory enactments against Indians, not only in the Dutch Transvaal, but even in British Natal, and this at a time when the imperial government had full authority to protect its subjects in both Dutch and British territory. All over South Africa, there was racial discrimination practiced against Indian, in trains, buses, schools, and hotels, and they were not allowed to move from one colony to another without a permit. In Natal, a British colony where Indians were in the largest number, a bill was about to be passed in 1894 to disenfranchise Indians, thus lowering their status and preventing them from exercising political rights. Gandhiji had come to South Africa in May 1893 on a professional visit as a lawyer. As he was about to leave South Africa in 1894, after the completion of his legal work, he noticed in the papers a reference to this bill. On his pointing out to his compatriots, most of whom were uneducated, the implications of this bill for them, they induced him to stay and help them. The work of seeking redress from this and other grievances of the Indians in South Africa kept him in that country for over 21 years, till 1914. So, dear listeners, this was the article, Historical Background of the South African Indian Problem, which gives a brief idea about situation in South Africa. As the article says, the Indian immigrants who came as contract laborers stayed there even after the indenture ended. By their industrious life and mercantile acumen, they amassed a small fortune, raising concerns that they were taking away opportunities from the Europeans. The then European-dominated South African government planned to suppress the Indians by imposing coercive laws. When Gandhi came to South Africa, the Indian people became aware of the law and started a campaign against the unjust laws of the Europeans. Dear listeners, in the coming episodes we will see how Gandhi formed a revolution with an unprecedented weapon called Satyagraha. Thank you for listening to Mahatma Gandhi Letters.